So Princess Anne just quietly deleted 5 prominent members of the Parker Bowles family from the official royal records with one single stroke of a pen. And the immediate consequence is that Queen Camilla's entire private power network inside the palace has been dismantled without a single public announcement. And honestly, this is way darker than regular palace housekeeping, because King Charles personally gave his sister the green light to move against his own wife's children. Before we get into the receipts and how this actually went down, hit subscribe real quick so you do not miss what happens next. We break down the real royal power moves every single week. All right, let us start where the story actually begins. And here's the part that actually gets crazy. Sometime in the early months of 2026, 5 specific names connected to Queen Camilla's family quietly vanished from the official royal rosters, patronage registers, and household records. No press release was handed out to reporters standing on the cobblestones outside Buckingham Palace. No formal television statement was read on the evening news. There was no polite, carefully worded leak sent to trusted royal correspondents at the major national broadsheets. There was simply a sudden, glaring absence where a prominent set of names used to sit for over 2 decades. Now, if you know anything about how the royal machine actually operates behind closed doors, you know that official rosters, court circular logs, and household patronage lists do not just magically update or edit themselves. Somebody inside the building has to sit down at a desk, open a master administrative ledger, weigh the political optics, consider the timing, and make an absolute irreversible call. And when royal researchers and seasoned palace watchers noticed those 5 empty slots in early 2026 and started frantically ringing the palace press office for a simple explanation, what came back across the telephone line was not a defensive denial or a routine administrative excuse. It was total, heavy, stone-cold silence. In the world of British royal reporting, a public denial is a formal statement you can analyse, pick apart, and challenge with sources. But total silence is a heavy iron door quietly swinging shut in a long corridor. And in the early weeks of 2026, 5 major doors had been slammed shut on Queen Camilla's immediate family. The host reacts like someone who cannot believe what they are about to tell you. Because when you look at who actually pulled the trigger on this purge, the entire picture changes instantly. The person who systematically erased those 5 names from the books was not a faceless junior secretary working in the Communications Bureau. It was Princess Anne, the Princess Royal, the second child and only daughter of Queen Elizabeth II. And the person who gave her the quiet, unquestioned authority to execute the removal was King Charles III himself. Think about what that actually means for a second. Let that detail sink in. A reigning king of the United Kingdom gave his sister explicit legal and administrative permission to move against his own wife's children and immediate relatives. That is not a minor family spat over dinner seating or holiday invitations. That is a monarch making a cold, calculated decision that his stepchildren are an institutional liability that his reign can no longer afford to carry. And honestly, when you understand how this was actually executed, behind closed doors, you realise why the palace PR machine went completely mute. To understand the sheer scale of this shock, you have to picture how royal news usually arrives in modern Britain. Normally, changes in the royal structure are delivered with massive public theatre. A grand balcony appearance, a golden carriage, procession, a formal charter stamped with state seals, or a televised speech delivered from an ornate drawing room. This move was the exact polar opposite of public theatre. This was a silent surgical subtraction. Somewhere in a quiet, administrative office on the ground floor of Buckingham Palace, a set of digital databases and physical ledgers got updated. A few lines of text were permanently deleted, and the only visible footprint left behind was a series of blank spaces that a handful of obsessive archival researchers happened to catch weeks later. No press cameras, no ceremonial flourishes, and 0 room for public debate. The host knows that in this specific world, the bigger and more devastating a decision is, the quieter it is made. The loud, dramatic announcements are designed for public consumption. The real ruthless power moves happen in total silence through subtle edits that nobody is supposed to spot until the ink has been dry for months. And Princess Anne had just executed 5 of them in a single afternoon. The public had no idea these names were even gone when the paperwork cleared, but to understand why Anne targeted these 5 specific people, you have to look at the invisible multi-million-pound empire they had spent 20 years quietly building inside the shadows of the crown. Now here is what makes this even more significant. To understand why removing 5 names from a royal list created such an explosive internal crisis, you have to stop thinking about ceremonial titles and start understanding how royal adjacency and soft power actually operate under British law. We are not talking about working royals who carry formal titles like His Royal Highness, or represent the crown on official state visits. We are talking about the vast, lucrative web of informal influence that sits directly beside the throne. In plain English, being officially listed on royal registers, patronage rolls, and household guest manifests is the single most valuable commercial asset in Great Britain. It is an unwritten golden ticket that guarantees access to the wealthiest networks on Earth. Let us look at who was actually sitting on those lists before Princess Anne picked up her pen. First, there is Tom Parker Bowles, Queen, Camilla's 49-year-old son. Tom is a well-known food writer, restaurant critic, and television personality who has authored several high-profile books on royal cuisine and British dining traditions. Now, to be completely fair, Tom is a talented writer who has worked hard in his field for over 2 decades. But let us be entirely honest about how media careers operate in London. That commercial independence was perpetually boosted by his proximity to the crown. When your mother is sitting beside the King of the United Kingdom, television networks pay higher production fees, book publishers hand out massive advance contracts, and luxury brand executives offer lucrative endorsement deals. His phone calls got returned in 5 minutes, while other writers waited 5 weeks. Second, there is Laura Lopes, Camilla's 45-year-old daughter, a prominent art curator who co-founded high-end gallery spaces in London. While Laura has maintained a significantly lower public profile than her brother, her position inside the royal machine was equally secure. She moved through elite circles, maintained personal relationships with senior palace staff, and enjoyed the quiet, unquestioned institutional goodwill that comes with being the Queen Consort's child. And beyond Tom and Laura, 3 additional names from the wider Parker Bowles network held subtle, unannounced positions on Duchy-linked advisory boards, regional heritage, trusts, and charitable committees connected to the Crown estate. None of these 5 individuals were formal state employees. None of them were funded directly by the sovereign grant. But their names on those official ledgers represented soft royal authority, the kind of invisible standing that allows private business figures to operate with the implicit backing of the royal household. And here is the detail that reframes the entire timeline building. That 5-person network inside the palace took Queen Camilla 2 full decades of painstaking strategic effort. Go back to April 9th, 2005. King Charles and Queen Camilla were married in a civil ceremony at the Windsor Guildhall, followed by a formal blessing at St. George's Chapel. Public hostility toward Camilla back then was staggering. Polls indicated that over 70% of the British public openly resented her presence due to her role in the collapse of Charles and Diana's marriage. So, the palace public relations apparatus launched Operation Parker Bowles, a 20-year slow-burning rehabilitation campaign designed to normalise Camilla and her family. Over 2 decades, Tom and Laura were gradually introduced into royal spaces. They were invited to private estate retreats at Sandringham and Balmoral, granted positions on charitable boards, and listed on household event rosters. They were never given royal titles, but they became recognised permanent fixtures inside the institution. It took 20 years of careful manoeuvring to weave the Parker Bowles family into the fabric of the monarchy. And Princess Anne tore that entire 20-year construction down in less than 20 minutes. Think about how lopsided that power dynamic actually is. It takes 2 decades of quiet PR manoeuvring to build an informal family network inside Buckingham Palace, but it takes only one signature from a determined princess royal to erase them from the history books forever. And when you look at why Anne felt so morally justified in executing this purge, you realise that this conflict did not start in 2026. It started 50 years ago with a decision Anne made for her own children. But to truly understand why Princess Anne could move against Queen Camilla's family without a single second of hesitation, you have to go back to the private history that the palace has spent decades trying to gloss over. You have to go back to the 1970s, and specifically to July 24th, 1976. Most people remember Princess Anne as the stoic, hard-working daughter of Queen Elizabeth II, who completes over 400 official engagements every single year. But what most people forget is that Anne was an elite, world-class athlete who competed in the 3-day equestrian eventing competition at the 1976 Olympic Games in Montreal, Canada. Anne earned her spot on the British Olympic team strictly through brutal physical training, grueling qualification trials, and raw individual talent. She received 0 royal exemptions, 0 special treatment, and 0 pass marks because of her title. She proved her worth on an international stage entirely on merit. When Anne married Captain Mark Phillips and gave birth to her 2 children, Peter Phillips in November 1977 and Zara Phillips in May 1981, she made an unprecedented historic decision that shocked the royal establishment. Anne flatly refused. King George VI's historic letters patent provisions that would have granted her children Her Royal Highness or His Royal Highness titles and Prince or Princess status. She explicitly barred Peter and Zara from receiving a single penny of public funding from the civil list or the sovereign grant. She looked at the palace courtiers and told them in plain English that her children would grow up without royal titles, without palace allowances, and without relying on crown proximity to make their living. Peter Phillips went into commercial sports management, working for corporate firms and Formula One racing teams. Zara Phillips became a world champion equestrian, winning an Olympic silver medal at the London 2012 Games through her own athletic excellence. Neither of them ever held official patronage rosters. Neither of them ever drew an income from the Duchy of Cornwall. Now stop and sit with what that personal history means in the context of 2026. Princess Anne made that hard, uncompromising choice for her own biological children nearly 50 years ago. She forced her own bloodline to stand on their own 2 feet and earn their living in the real world, without leaning on the crown as a financial crutch. So when Anne looked at Queen Camilla's grown children, Tom Parker, Bowles and Laura Lopes, sitting on royal patronage registers, enjoying duchy-adjacent access and leveraging royal proximity for commercial gain, her reaction was not just political, it was deeply viscerally personal. Anne looked at the Parker Bowles roster and applied the exact same ruthless standards she had imposed on her own family. If my children cannot draw on the crown's resources, your children certainly will not. And then comes the Diana layer, the deep, unresolved wound that gives this entire operation its moral weight. Princess Anne was there throughout the 1980s and 90s. She sat inside palace walls and watched the catastrophic breakdown of Charles and Diana's marriage in real time. She watched as an informal, off-the-record clique of courtiers, PR operatives, and outside influencers protected Charles and Camilla, while systematically isolating Princess Diana. She watched as Diana's cries for help were dismissed as emotional instability, while the palace PR machine worked behind closed doors to rehabilitate Camilla's image. Anne kept her stoic silence for 30 years because she believed that absolute loyalty to Queen Elizabeth II required burying her personal feelings. But Anne never forgot what she witnessed. She saw how an unaccountable informal courtier culture can ruin vulnerable people and corrode the credibility of the crown. When Queen Elizabeth passed away in September 2022, the ancient protective seal of the late Queen's reign was lifted. Anne looked at the modern monarchy under King Charles, saw Camilla's family expanding their footprint inside royal spaces, and decided that the 30-year wait was officially over. She had the personal principle, she had the memory of Diana's isolation, and she had 50 years of unblemished public service behind her. All she needed was the exact right institutional crisis to strike. And this is the detail that stopped me cold when I first read about it, because it shows you how deep the roots of the Parker Bowles network had actually spread. To understand why Princess Anne moved with such clinical force in early 2026, you have to look at the concrete scheme that Queen Camilla's team had been executing in total secrecy for over 2 decades. Following the 2005 wedding, Camilla's private advisors realised that securing her personal title as Queen Consort was only half the battle. They knew that if Camilla remained an isolated figure inside the royal family, her long-term influence would always be vulnerable to Prince William once he inherited the Duchy of Cornwall. So they devised a subtle, multi-layered strategy designed to build a permanent Parker Bowles infrastructure inside the Crown's operational framework. Step 1 involved Tom Parker Bowles. Over a 15-year period, Tom was quietly positioned as an informal culinary consultant for major royal estate events. When Highgrove House or Sandringham hosted high-profile charitable galas or international summits, Tom's literary contacts and food industry partners were frequently brought in as commercial vendors or event coordinators. It was framed as harmless family support, but it established a direct financial and operational pipeline between Tom's commercial brand and the royal estate network. Step 2 centered on Laura Lopes. Laura was quietly appointed to secondary advisory panels for heritage art trusts and historic building conservation funds connected to the Crown estate. These were not public-facing royal jobs that required daily press announcements. They were influential behind-the-scenes committee roles, where decisions regarding artwork loans, exhibition spaces, and corporate sponsorships were made. Step 3 was the most audacious maneuver of all, expanding the network to Camilla's wider circle. By 2023, 3 additional relatives and long-time associates from the Parker Bowles network had landed positions as non-executive trustees on regional trusts in the West Country, specifically around Somerset and Wiltshire, where Camilla owns her private estate, Ray Mill House. These individuals were placed in positions where they could interact directly with high-net-worth estate donors, property developers, and local planning officials under the umbrella of royal patronages. Think about what that structure actually accomplished. It created a self-sustaining web of influence where the Parker Bowles family was no longer just visiting Camilla for summer holidays. They were actively embedded in the administrative, commercial, and social architecture of the British monarchy. By early 2025, the strategy was on the verge of total success. Tom was publishing best-selling books on royal culinary history. Laura was managing high-level art partnerships with royal backing, and their associates held key positions on regional trusts. They had built an informal family court that operated inside the palace without ever having to submit to public accounting or parliamentary scrutiny. Camilla's advisors assumed that, because King Charles was on the throne, nobody inside the royal household would ever dare challenge her family's standing. They believed that 20 years of gradual integration had made the Parker Bowles network an untouchable permanent feature of the crown. They made one fatal error. They completely misjudged the health crisis that hit Buckingham Palace in early 2024. And they completely failed to anticipate how quickly a major scandal in early 2026 would destroy their protection. Okay, so here is the part that actually changes everything. This is the pivot chapter, where the whole story shifts from a quiet internal resentment into an active, high-level administrative execution. The catalyst that broke the entire situation wide open arrived in February 2026. In early February 2026, the ongoing legal fallout surrounding Prince Andrew reached a catastrophic breaking point. Unredacted court documents and law enforcement disclosures released in the United States sparked an overwhelming wave of public outrage across the United Kingdom. Demonstrators gathered outside palace gates. Political leaders in Parliament called for immediate legislative overhauls of royal finances, and public approval ratings for the monarchy dropped to historic lows. The British public was demanding absolute unvarnished accountability, an end to royal freeloaders, an end to backroom influence, and an immediate purge of anyone drawing on crown resources without explicit public benefit. While the palace communications team was frantically trying to manage the media fallout from the Andrew scandal, Princess Anne saw her exact historical window. Anne did not call a press conference. She did not leak a story to a newspaper editor. On a cold Tuesday afternoon in mid-February 2026, Princess Anne walked into King Charles's private study at Buckingham Palace carrying a thick black leather binder. Inside that binder was not a collection of media rumours. It was a comprehensive dated audit of every single patronage, advisory role, and institutional connection held by the Parker Bowles family across the entire royal estate network. Anna laid the binder flat on her brother's desk. She opened it to the first section and walked the king through the paper trail step by step. She showed him how Tom Parker Bowles's commercial culinary projects were leveraging duchy estate connections. She showed him how Laura Lopes' art initiatives were quietly utilising crown spaces. She showed him how 3 wider associates were sitting on regional heritage boards without formal compliance oversight. And then Princess Anne looked her brother in the eye and delivered a flat, uncompromising verdict that left King Charles completely stunned. If we are going to survive the Andrew crisis, we cannot preach accountability to the nation while maintaining a private family court in the shadows. The Parker Bowles names must be removed today. Let that moment sink in. King Charles was 77 years old, physically exhausted from 2 years of continuous draining cancer treatments that had begun in February 2024. He was facing immense political pressure over Prince Andrew, desperately trying to protect the stability of his reign, and sitting across the desk from his sister, the most trusted, hard-working woman in the country. Charles looked at the evidence laid out in the binder. He realised in a single agonising second that if the press discovered the full extent of the Parker Bowles network in the middle of the Andrew crisis, the resulting scandal would completely destroy the credibility of his reign. He knew that he could not defend his wife's children without looking hopelessly hypocritical to the nation. King Charles took a fountain pen, reached down to the bottom of the audit sheet, and signed his formal executive royal authorization. He gave Princess Anne total unchecked legal and administrative power to purge all 5 names from the royal records. Crucially, Charles signed the order while Queen Camilla was out of the building on an official visit to Wiltshire. He gave his sister the green light to move against his own wife's family without giving Camilla a single second of advance warning. The trap was signed, sealed and delivered, and Princess Anne was ready to execute the sentence instantly. This is where Princess Anne acts with a speed and decisiveness that proves why she is the most formidable figure inside the House of Windsor. Anne did not wait 72 hours. She did not call a family conference. She did not give Camilla's private secretaries an opportunity to hire legal counsel or draft defensive PR briefs. At 9 o'clock on Wednesday morning, Princess Anne walked into the Central Administrative Registry of the Lord Chamberlain's office at Buckingham Palace. She handed the King's signed executive authorization directly to the senior keeper of the records. Within 90 minutes, a systematic, quiet, administrative execution took place across the internal databases of the royal household. Name 1. Tom Parker. Bowles formally removed from all official event registries. State, dinner guest, manifests, and Duchy-linked culinary advisory lists. Name 2. Laura Lopes, permanently removed from Heritage Art Conservation Boards and Royal Gallery liaison roles. Names 3, 4, and 5. The 3 wider Parker Bowles Associates, summarily stripped of their non-executive trustee positions on regional estate trusts in Somerset and Wiltshire. Every single file was updated. Every single digital entry was scrubbed. Every formal patronage credential was revoked. Now, some of you are probably asking how Anne could carry out such a massive internal purge without triggering an immediate screaming war inside Clarence House. The answer lies in the brilliant, unassailable mechanism she chose. Anne did not issue a public statement saying, "I am firing the Queen's children." That would have created an immediate media spectacle. Instead, she invoked a formal internal administrative directive titled The Sovereign Representation and Compliance Protocol of 2026. Under the plain English terms of this binding rule, any individual who does not hold direct official working royal status or explicit parliamentary authorization is legally prohibited from holding formal patronages or representational roles within the Crown estate. It was an absolute bulletproof corporate cleanup. Anne applied a cold, impersonal legal rule that applied equally to everyone. A rule that Camilla's team could not publicly fight without admitting that they were seeking special unearned privileges for their family. And think about why Princess Anne was the only person in Britain who could pull this off. If Prince William had executed the purge alone, Camilla's media team would have instantly leaked stories accusing William of carrying out a petty personal vendetta against his stepmother to avenge Princess Diana. But nobody could ever accuse Princess Anne of playing petty PR games. Anne is 75 years old, works 16 hours a day, takes zero public funding for her own children, and commands absolute respect from the British public and the civil service. When Anne signed the paperwork, it did not look like family revenge. It looked like pure, unadulterated institutional discipline. She turned her unblemished public reputation into the ultimate cover, executing a permanent strike while leaving Camilla with zero ground to fight back. The removals were locked into the system before noon. The paperwork was filed in the estate vaults. And then came the moment when the public signal hit the outside world. And here is the thing about how real royal power operates. Nobody made a dramatic speech on television. Nobody issued a press release confirming a family feud. But in early March 2026, a single administrative update communicated the entire power shift to the world without anyone saying a word. Every year, the royal household publishes its updated annual directory of official patronages, representational duties, and household associations. A massive detailed document that is distributed to senior civil servants, government liaisons, and accredited royal correspondents. When the 2026 directory was uploaded to the official royal web portal on a quiet Thursday morning, researchers who cross-reference household documents immediately downloaded the files and ran comparative scans against the 2025 records. The result of those comparative scans sent immediate shockwaves through the royal press corps. Under the sections where Tom Parker Bowles and Laura Lopes had previously been listed for over 15 years, there were simply blank spaces. Their names had been completely erased. Their patronage affiliations were gone. The 3 wider Parker Bowles Associates had been entirely removed from the West Country Trust registers. Within 2 hours, royal correspondents began frantically calling the palace press office, demanding an official statement, explaining why Queen Camilla's immediate family had been completely scrubbed from the household records. The response from Buckingham Palace was a masterclass in cold bureaucratic dismissal. The annual directory reflects the formal operational requirements of the working monarchy. We do not offer commentary on non-official individuals. Decode that sentence for a second. In plain English, the palace explicitly categorized Queen Camilla's children as non-official individuals who held zero standing inside the monarchy. The clip and news brief spread across international news networks within hours. Millions of people read the headlines, slowed down the analysis, and understood exactly what had transpired. To an outsider, reading a newspaper headline, it sounded like a routine, administrative cleanup following the Prince Andrew scandal. But to everyone inside the royal establishment, that simple directory update was the visual confirmation of a total crushing defeat for Queen Camilla. While the news was breaking across global media platforms, Tom Parker Bowles was forced to face the reality of his new standing. That same week, Tom published his regular high-profile food column for a major national magazine. The article was cheerful, polished, and impeccably written, covering spring seasonal recipes. But behind the scenes, the invisible infrastructure that had supported his commercial network for 2 decades had completely vanished. The private phone calls to Duchy, estate, managers were no longer returned. The automatic invitations to exclusive palace receptions were no longer delivered. The soft, unwritten prestige that had allowed his brand to command top-tier commercial pricing was abruptly terminated. He had not received a dramatic dismissal letter. Nobody had screamed at him in a hallway. His name had simply been erased from a digital registry, and the heavy doors of the royal machine had quietly permanently clicked shut. Camilla stood in her study at Clarence House, holding the printed directory in her shaking hands, realizing that her 20-year effort to secure her family's place inside the crown had completely collapsed in a single afternoon. And Camilla's team went into full damage control mode, but it completely fell apart because you cannot spin a reality that everyone inside the building can clearly see. The internal collapse of Queen Camilla's private power base throughout March 2026 was swift, clinical, and utterly devastating. Following the public signal of the directory update, Camilla called an emergency strategy meeting inside her private apartments at Clarence House. Present in the room were her senior personal secretary, her media advisor, and her longtime legal attaché. Camilla demanded that her team find an immediate administrative mechanism to reinstate her children's advisory roles or launch a quiet media briefing campaign to counter Princess Anne's narrative. Her media advisor sat in absolute silence for several long seconds before delivering the brutal truth. There was zero strategy left to execute. If Camilla's team leaked stories to friendly newspapers criticizing the purge, Prince William's office would immediately release the full documented audit of the Parker Bowles network's commercial links to Duchy properties. The media would have a field day dissecting how Camilla's family had benefited from royal proximity, completely destroying whatever public goodwill Camilla had accumulated over 20 years. Camilla was trapped in an absolute impenetrable vice. Look at the total isolation that surrounded the Queen Consort in that stone room. First, she could not turn to her husband for help. King Charles was the very man who had personally signed the executive authorization, allowing Anne to execute the purge. Charles was physically frail, exhausted from ongoing medical treatments, and terrified that defending Camilla's family would ruin his reign during the Andrew crisis. Leaning on Charles only created immense friction inside her marriage. Second, she could not negotiate with Prince William. William had already proven his ruthless stance on royal finances when he took control of the Duchy of Cornwall in late 2022. One of William's very first actions as Duke of Cornwall had been to permanently fire Annabel Elliot, Camilla's younger sister, from her lucrative 19-year position as lead interior designer for Duchy holiday cottages. William had already cut her sister. Now he was fully backing Anne's purge of her children. Third, Princess Catherine was rapidly expanding her operational authority across the household. Following her return to full public duties in 2025, Catherine had been granted unprecedented strategic authority over royal charity foundations and event planning. Catherine was acting as a formidable co-strategist, alongside William smoothly taking over core public spaces, while Camilla's footprint shrank. And fourth here is the detail that completed her isolation. Camilla's closest personal friend outside the family, Zara Ferguson, had become entirely radioactive. In early 2026, newly released court documents connected to the Jeffrey Epstein investigation featured Zara Ferguson's name. In numerous private correspondence logs, Prince William explicitly informed Camilla that her continued public friendship with Ferguson was a massive security liability to the crown. When Camilla stubbornly refused to abandon her friend of 30 years, William used her poor judgment as further justification to cut her household budget and limit her operational access. Every single pillar supporting Camilla's private power base had been systematically kicked out from under her. Her sister was off the Duchy payroll. Her children were erased from the royal registers. Her best friend was toxic. Her stepson held the checkbook, and her husband had signed the surrender papers. Sitting in her study at Clarence House late that evening, Queen Camilla was forced to confront the cold, terrifying reality of her position. She wore a gold crown, but inside the rooms where power actually lives, she was completely, totally alone. And then in late March 2026, Prince William and Princess Anne delivered the last irreversible closure that permanently locked the door on the Parker Bowles network forever. This was not a dramatic confrontation staged for television cameras. There were no shouting matches in palace corridors. At 2 o'clock on a Thursday afternoon, Prince William, Princess Anne, and Sir Jonathan Arborfield, the Duchy of Cornwall's senior legal counsel, convened a formal governance meeting inside the sovereign vaults at Windsor Castle. Together, they finalised and signed a legally binding executive charter titled The Crown Succession and Heritage Governance Protocol of 2026. This document was not a set of polite guidelines. It was a permanent, legally binding institutional statute that formally restructured the governance of the British monarchy for the next 2 generations. Under the explicit legal terms signed by William and Anne, 3 non-negotiable laws were permanently written into Crown governance. Rule 1. Absolute prohibition of any non-working royal step, relative, or in-law holding official patronages, representational duties, or commercial advisory roles within the Crown estate network. Rule 2. Mandatory annual independent financial audits of all duchy contractors and estate vendors with 0 exemptions for family connections. Rule 3. Total transfer of all household scheduling event, manifests and representational approvals to a joint committee headed personally by the Prince of Wales and the Princess Royal. Think about what that legal charter accomplished. With a single stroke of a pen, Prince William and Princess Anne permanently stripped Queen Camilla and any future royal spouse of the ability to ever embed their private family into the institutional architecture of the monarchy again. They took the informal backroom courtier culture that had operated inside Buckingham Palace for over 2 centuries and rendered it legally extinct. When Sir Jonathan Arborfield placed the signed charter into the estate safe at Windsor Castle, the war was officially over. No statement was issued to the newspapers. No press release was broadcast on news channels. The media was told absolutely nothing. Just a signed legal charter, locked inside a vault, a permanently updated digital directory, and 5 names erased from royal history forever. And that was it. That was the whole thing. Done. The closure was absolute final and completely irreversible. But when you step back and look at the entire chain of events that unfolded across early 2026, you realise that this story reveals something so much bigger than just a paperwork adjustment. When you step back and look at the entire chain of events, what you actually see is something so much more profound than just a family dispute over patronage lists. This was a massive 50-year generational reckoning. Look at what Queen Camilla attempted to do over 2 decades. She spent 20 years executing a careful, methodical rehabilitation campaign, moving from the most resented woman in Britain, following Princess Diana's death, to Queen Consort, sitting beside the King at Westminster Abbey. She operated under the old 19th century courtier assumption that proximity to the monarch grants ultimate immunity, that as long as King Charles was on the throne, her children, her relatives, and her private networks could enjoy quiet, unearned royal privileges forever. She completely miscalculated Princess Anne and Prince William. Princess Anne is a 75-year-old woman who gave her entire life to selfless public duty, who refused royal titles for her own children, and who earned her standing through raw merit. She looked at Camilla's attempt to build a private family court inside the palace and recognised it as a toxic threat to the survival of the crown. And Prince William is no longer the 15-year-old boy who stood helplessly in Kensington Palace in August 1997, watching informal palace cliques isolate and destroy his mother, Princess Diana. He is a mature 43-year-old Duke of Cornwall who controls a £1.2 billion private empire, commands total loyalty from legal and compliance teams, and understands every single trick in the palace PR machine. When the Andrew scandal threatened to engulf the monarchy in early 2026, William and Anne did not engage in media briefing wars. They used precision corporate audits, binding legal charters, and absolute institutional leverage to dismantle Camilla's private network in broad daylight. They proved a fundamental permanent truth to the entire royal establishment. In the modern British monarchy, unearned privilege gets cut every single time. By taking absolute uncompromising control over royal governance, William and Anne sent a deafening message to every courtier, every relative, and every future royal. The crown is not a private family business to be leveraged for personal gain. It is a sacred public trust that belongs strictly to those who earn it through selfless service. The power dynamic inside the House of Windsor has permanently shifted. Queen Camilla still wears her crown, she still attends official state dinners, and she still stands beside King Charles on the balcony of Buckingham Palace. But inside the records that define who actually belongs, her private influence is completely, totally dead. Her children are erased from the rosters. Her sister is off the payroll. Her networks are dismantled, and every single document is guarded by an heir who remembers everything. He witnessed as a child and an aunt who spent 50 years showing the world how royal duty is supposed to be done. She still holds the title of Queen Consort, but inside the records that define who actually belongs, Princess Anne just proved that 20 years of proximity can be erased in a single afternoon.